Welcome to I-24 News Defense, a weekly review of strategic affairs, security, intelligence, and more in cooperation with Israel Defense Magazine. Tonight, after the latest horrific attack on a Jerusalem synagogue, we'll ask if it's still a lone wolf phenomenon or a coordinated intifada. And later in the show, we'll look at the mounting security crisis in Mexico. Let's begin.
نعلن مسؤوليتنا الكاملة في الجبهة الشعبية عن هذه العملية البطولية التي نفذها أبطالنا صباح هذا اليوم في مدينة القدس.
الحركة تدعو إلى استمرار عملية الثأر حماية للمسجد الأقصى.
Well, what we see here is a deliberate initiative of Abu Mazen to boil the capital of Israel, Jerusalem.
في الوقت الذي ندين هذا العمل أيضا ندين الاعتداءات على الحرم القدسي.
הסתה שבאה לידי ביטוי במובנים דתיים שלא יכירי מקומם כאן, כי אין לנו מלחמה בין יהודים לאסלאם.
And joining me now in the studio is Pinchas Inbari, a senior analyst at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. Mr. Inbari, thanks very much for joining me. So in the clip we just saw, we heard the words religious, we heard Al-Aqsa, we heard the Temple Mount several times. You've covered this conflict for decades. Is it possible to say this is not a religious war? Is it in fact what's happening now in Jerusalem a religious war?
It is also a religious war, not only. It is part of the larger phenomenon of the Arab storm, that we may say. What we see around us in Syria, in Egypt, in Libya, in Iraq, it's religious war, sectorial war, and we joined the club lately.
What distinguishes, though, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict from the rest of these conflicts? Because it is a very specific situation, nonetheless.
Well, it should be, but it is not, because those who planned this kind of intifada, they wanted to advance the national idea of Palestinian state, etc. But they cannot escape the fact that we are in the Middle East now, and nationalism is not riding the horse now. It is religion and sects. Okay, so what we witness now is Jews against Arabs. It's not Israelis against Palestinians who are struggling to have an independent state. This is not the case.
So you use the words a planned intifada. What we've seen recently in East Jerusalem are so-called lone wolf attacks, including the horrific attack on the synagogue this week. Is it in fact a coordinated effort then, a coordinated intifada?
Yes, I think so, yes. It is planned to be popular. It is planned to be lone wolf operations. But they are planning already 2 years now. And they called it...
Who is they?
It's Fatah and Hamas together. Okay, when they met together for the reconciliation talks to establish unity government and to reunite Palestine, they failed in this mission. But in the corridors, they talked about how to coordinate the next intifada. And in this, they agreed. They agreed about it.
So has Hamas actually gotten a stronger, let's say since Operation Protective Edge, since the summer's war between Israel and Hamas, has Hamas become stronger in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem, where this violence is particular in East Jerusalem, where we're seeing this rise in violence?
Yes. Hamas is stronger.
Stronger than Fatah?
Yes, stronger than Fatah, yes. And we are going to witness it tomorrow. They called for mass demonstrations in the West Bank tomorrow. And I doubt whether the PA security can contain them. Let us see tomorrow.
As you know very well, this is by no means the first round, so to speak, of this conflict, and this region has seen an intifada twice before. How does this situation, if it is indeed an intifada, how is this different than, say, the early 2000s?
Okay, the only intifada that was really popular and spontaneous was the first intifada. Okay, this was the only one, and this spontaneous outbreak of the Palestinians in the West Bank surprised the PLO. Okay, and led to the creation of Hamas. Okay? Now, the second intifada was well planned. It was well planned by the PLO. By the PLO. This intifada is also planned, but this intifada is planned to be popular. That no organization is taking responsibility. What we saw about Popular Front taking responsibility about what happened in Jerusalem is a joke, because there is no presence to Popular Front
them taking
in Jerusalem.
responsibility for the attack.
Yes. The Har-Nov. The family, as far as I asked the East Jerusalemites, the family of Abu Jamal is known to be linked to Islamic Jihad.
Can you envision a point, going back to Hamas and Fatah, can you envision a point where Hamas will rise to official power, not just underground pushing forward an intifada, but actually take power in the West Bank, for example, not just in the Gaza Strip?
Yes. Here we have to come back to two factors. First, Hamas basically is interested only in Gaza. Hamas is not interested in the West Bank. Okay, when Hamas is interested in the West Bank, when they evaluate that Ramallah wants to take over Gaza. And now in the reconciliation efforts, what Hamas sees in Gaza, that behind this reconstruction plan, Abu Mazen wants to return to Gaza. So they say, if Abu Mazen wants to return to Gaza, we shall hit him in Ramallah.
Ending for a moment then on the Israeli side, we've heard calls from the more extreme portions, at least the right wing of the Israeli government, including Economy Minister Naftali Bennett, calling for martial law, for an actual military intervention in East Jerusalem. Can you envision something like that happening?
I think it is very. It is wrong. It is wrong because West Jerusalem and East Jerusalem are now. They are united now, despite of what you may see. Right. I was going in East Jerusalem in the peak of events, and most of the city was calm and normal. Okay, there were spots of violence here and there, in the margins. Okay, but the city was calm. The East Jerusalemites until now are not dragged into the conflict. Teenagers, youngsters, Fatah cadres, Hamas cadres, Islamic Jihad, etc. Not the ordinary citizens. And I don't understand. Jerusalem is already under Israeli control. To reconquer
what more will they actually do?
Yeah.
Well, a very complex situation. Thank you for at least a little bit more insight, understanding what's going on there. Pinchas Inbari, thanks very much for being with us.
My pleasure.
Moving on now, some 100,000 people have been killed since 2007 as a result of organized crime in Mexico. Now the country is in the midst of a crisis in both the political and security spheres following the disappearance and feared massacre of 43 students. Here's more from Daniel Ziri.
A wave of fury has swept the streets of Mexico in the last month over the fate of 43 students who disappeared and were probably massacred 7 weeks ago. The drama began with a demonstration by a group of the students' teachers, which descended into violence in the southern Mexican town of Iguala. The Attorney General suspects that after the students were arrested, corrupt policemen handed them over to the Grosa Unidos drug cartel, who executed and burned them. The former mayor of Iguala, José Luis Abraca, and his wife are suspected of involvement in the horrible event. Abraca reportedly feared that the protesters would disrupt an attempt by his wife to succeed him as mayor.
This was not the information that we wanted to hear.
Following the disappearance, demonstrations, roadblocks, bus hijacking, sieges, and assaults on public buildings erupted in different parts of Mexico. The "I'm tired" phrase used by the Attorney General has become the symbol of the disconnect between the public and the authorities. In Mexico, thousands of protesters have filled the streets, blocking the main roads. Other protesters set fire to the local headquarters of the president's party in the state of Guerrero. The bodies of the missing students have yet to be identified, but the mass demonstrations could point the beginning of the end for President Enrique Peña Nieto.
And joining me now is Isaac Tusier, our correspondent in Mexico City. Isaac, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Nurit. Thank you for having me.
So Mexico has seen years of extreme gang violence, mass deaths, 100,000 since 2007. Has this particular event struck a nerve there?
Well, yeah, I think that in general, the population seems quite sad. You don't hear the sounds that you used to hear in the streets. People in general are just tired and are sad in general. And we do get a lot of positive support for people who are protesting, which is something that isn't common here in Mexico.
So with protests in full swing this week, what does the situation look like there inside the city on the ground?
Well, the atmosphere in the city, and I think in the whole country, is that of grief, and it's that of feeling. There's this feeling of being left alone by the government. You know, the mass killings have been they're sent by the government, by the governor, by the mayor of Iguala, which is a state crime. So in that sense, the whole population is really, really angry, because we all feel that the government is part of the violence, everything that's going on.
So, Isaac, just how deep is the clash between the government, security forces, and the average people on the street?
It's pretty heavy. I mean, lately clashes have been upscaling, and there has been some cases of violence in the rallies that have been happening all around Mexico, and these rallies have been happening all around the world now. We hear about rallies in Austria where they're testing the DNA of the remains of the humans found in the river, and we hear about even football matches. Mexico played against Holland in the minute 43 because it's 43 deaths. Mexicans in the stadium started screaming. So we do feel that there is an uproar right now, and it is scaling.
So after all these years of gang violence, do you think this huge gap in trust between them, between security and the people, can be rebuilt?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say. Mexico has been a country where the government has played a big role in corruption, a big role in violence, and now we're hearing about this again after 1968, where there was a student massacre, and now the state is committing crimes again, apparently. And so this is something that the whole population is rebelling against, you know, and we do feel that democracy has advanced, but as in any Latin American country, there is still, or any developing country, there is still a long road to go.
So, Isaac, looking forward for a moment, with enraged parents demanding information and action, can we expect an actual clear answer from the government on this?
Well, I think that's part of the problem. Part of the problem is we don't see a clear response from the government. So, for example, we see that the president went to meetings in China and then joined the G20 in Australia. And part of the whole anger and the uproar is because the government of Mexico has not given the answers to the people that they want to hear from the government, right? Like, it's not like the president is involved directly with the mass killings, but in a sense, the general population of Mexico feels that the president is absent in a time where he should be here.
Is there a sense that corruption, that gangs run the show?
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. Everybody here in Mexico feels that corruption is part of daily life. You know, if you get stopped on the street by a cop, they'll ask you for a bribe, and it goes from all the lower levels all the way to the top. And that is a general feeling. I mean, obviously I cannot confirm that, but that is the general feeling that Mexicans have.
So one more thing then on that note, do these demonstrations actually have the potential to push this government out of office?
I really don't think so. I really don't think so, because as I said, this government was not directly involved. I mean, it was a state crime, but done by the mayor of Iguala. What did happen is the governor of the state of the city in Iguala, which is the governor of Guerrero, stepped aside. But I think that's as far as things are going to go. Also, the people who are demonstrating, they're asking for Peña Nieto, the president, to step aside as well. but they're not really proposing a new government or anything. So it's just it's anger towards the president, anger towards the whole government, but they're not really proposing like a change of government.
Isaac Tucia in Mexico City for us. Thanks very much for this.
Thank you, Nurit. Pleasure. Thank you.
And that's it for this edition. Be sure to catch us next week from here in the Jaffa Port. For now, we'll leave you with pictures of the South Korean Navy's large-scale amphibious landing drill held during their annual military exercise. Thanks for watching.